All right, we're going to talk about free speech, and to do that, let's bring in my regular Tuesday night panel, Executive Director of the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Cater, and Sky News contributor, Kosha Gada. I'll start with free speech and New Zealand because I said before the break, the High Priestess of Woke, Jacinda Ardern, made a big speech in New York last week talking about acting upon the latest weapon of war. Have a listen.
This is no longer a hypothetical. The weapons of war have changed. They are upon us and require the same level of action and activity that we put into the weapons of old. How do you tackle climate change if people do not believe it exists? The weapons may be different, but the goals of those who perpetuate them is often the same.
Kosha, this is a war on free speech. There she is on the main stage of the United Nations, and she's denying people the freedom of speech that we've waged wars to deliver.
Yes, Peta, good to be with you. You know, she does really seem to enjoy the global limelight quite a bit. I think that's one thing that's telling over here between this speech at the UN. She's been on the cover of Vogue magazine. She gave the commencement address at Harvard University very recently. And I think that's telling. I think everybody should beware when there's an elected public official that's really interested in global limelight and the celebrity that modern day politics affords rather than serving the people that they were elected to run. But on your point of free speech, I think the underlying dynamic that's going on right now is the internet and technology has really democratized information flow, even notwithstanding the issues with big tech and everything else that we talk about. And as that happens, you're going to see governments up the ante against that. And she sort of is a poster child for somebody who can do that, and that's ultimately what this is about. She gave that infamous speech about how she should be the one source of truth, that the government of New Zealand should be the one source of truth on COVID, and many other things right here. She's touching on climate change, and that's what this is about. So see that sort of sentiment rise around the world as they up the ante against, what's happening with free information flow brought about by the internet.
Nick, you watch the political game in New Zealand very closely. I mean, I have a view. She won't run again. This is an audition for a world job a la Helen Clark, although Helen Clark at least stayed there and did some domestic stuff first. I mean, this is about her migrating into one of those usual UN jobs that people end up in after politics. But how do you see this issue?
Well, I think you're right, Peter. I mean, she reserves these sort of impassioned speeches in which she sort of betrays New Zealand to the conscience of the world for the United Nations, doesn't she? And remember, this is the same Prime Minister who said quite recently in July that climate change was a bigger threat to the Pacific region than China. So that's where her head is. And in this speech, she says that she wants some kind of, she's not specific about it, but some sort of global alliance to deal with misinformation on the internet. I think she may be actually behind the eight ball on this, because that, in fact, already exists. I mean, as we know, social media has become a very powerful force in censoring things they don't like, interfering in US politics, and now even in Australian politics, with that incident last week when the IPA put a video out putting the no case against the referendum on The Voice, including Jacinta Price, and that got taken down by Facebook. You know, an Aboriginal woman is decided that an Aboriginal woman should have no voice on Facebook in promoting the cause for an Aboriginal voice for Parliament. It makes no sense, but it is really, I find this really quite sinister. It's there already, and Jacinta Ardern is just reinforcing what's already happening.
I just spoke with George Brandis about this a minute ago, Kosha, but what's your take on this enormous backflip in the UK? I mean, I wanted to will Liz Truss to do well. I liked plenty of elements there in that mini budget. I think the fact that she absented for a week, didn't defend it when it started to get rocky. She ran a mile, and now she's backed down on one of the big elements today. I mean, can she recover, or are we going to see more Thatcher than May here?
Backflips usually don't end well because you sort of hand a cudgel to the other side to whack you with forevermore, and they've wasted no time doing that. I think sitting out for 4 days was probably a mistake. There is an argument to be made, even in the inflationary environment that the UK and the whole world is in, even with rising energy prices and everything else. There is a case to be made that this is a bedrock of conservative principles. Tax cuts are a good thing on an economic level, on a moral level, and getting out front and defending that, could have been a play, even though obviously she's expected to take a lot of heat, and she's got to be able to stand up to that. So I think that's a little bit disappointing. The bigger problem is it didn't come attached with any spending cuts of significance, especially the energy subsidies that were in that mini budget that didn't get even half as much attention. That's actually more expensive than what the fiscal cuts were, and what she and the chancellor do with respect to spending cuts and energy policy, I think, is a make or break issue for her. She has a chance to stand out over here in terms of conservative leaders that have come before her, and I hope she rises to the occasion.
Nick?
Well, I think what Truss failed to do, Thatcher did very well, is just persuade the public. She didn't clearly articulate what they were putting these tax cuts in place for, and therefore she allowed Labour to come out and define it for her. I mean, Labour have been saying that this is, a sop to the rich, and that's the way it's stuck, even though it's not. So I think it's quite disappointing that she hasn't been able to stand firm, but I think if you don't go out and make that case in very clear language, in firm language from the very start, then you probably get yourself compromised in this position. And there is a feeling, of course, that things are pretty hopeless over there. The polls are very, very bad, and I really personally, just taking soundings from people in the UK, from family and others, I just think that the Tories are really on the nose there, and you've got a winter of discontent coming up, and this time the Tories have to own it.